What is aniconism? The term aniconism is generally defined as the absence of material representations of the natural and supernatural world in various cultures. One of the most important aniconic phases in history is in Buddhism. This aniconic phase is early in Buddhist iconography and has been dated from the 5th to the 1st century BC, but the first clear manifestations were during the Mauryan period, 322 BC to 180 BC. Buddha was only represented through particular symbols such as the stupa, the cosmic pillar, the prayer wheel, Buddha's footprints, the Bodhi tree and empty throne, the parasol, and the lotus, which will all be individually assessed further. The reason behind these aniconic representations derives from one of Buddha's sayings in the Digha Nikaya, which is a collection of long discourses, specifically 34 texts in the Sutra Pitaka or Suttanta Pitaka. He discouraged representations of himself after the extinction of his body. Buddha was represented only by symbols because he had achieved nirvana and was no longer thought to be in physical form. A primary figure who encouraged aniconism in Buddhist art is the Emperor Ashoka. He therefore established the Ashokan pillar. This vital feature was used simultaneously in early Buddhist iconography with stupas. Aniconism was fundamental in telling the story of Buddha in narrative scenes displayed in decorative stupas and other sculpture. Following this pattern, other symbols and elements began to share this representation and ultimately became essential to the history of Buddhism. Described by Vidya Dehasia, an associate director and chief curator of Southeast Asian art, a stupa is a solid earthen mound that enshrined a portion of the relics of Buddha and was a focal point of Buddhist monasteries across India. From central India, the great stupa at Sanchi is said to be the best preserved of early stone stupas according to Dehasia, and was originally built in 250 BC and then enlarged and renovated from 50 BC to 25 BC. The great stupa at Sanchi used narrative reliefs to tell Buddha's life story. Episodes of the Buddha's life and teachings are displayed through the decoration of the stupa in the typical form of tablets or friezes, which also display other aniconic symbols like the Chakra, the footprint, the Bodhi tree and empty throne, the parasol, and the lotus. For the most part, the carved reliefs were located on railings and gateways, or in some cases as part of the facing of the exterior of stupas. These images help to communicate and reinforce the central meaning of the monuments they adorned. Devotion to the relics of Buddha was a considerable activity of the stupa, so the prominent motif in the carvings is indeed fitting. The stupa was made up of the torana, the gateway or portal around the stupa, the anda, the dome itself, the Shatravali, the umbrellas at the top of the capital, and most importantly, the yashti, the middle staff. The relics of Buddha were spread at the center of the stupa and placed at the base of the yashti, also called the cosmic pillar and axis mundi. The yashti's central placement in the stupa and its height was meant to resemble the separation of heaven and earth like the story of creation from Vedic literature. It served as a symbol of Buddha's teaching and was also a necessity for an emperor so that he could rule peacefully and without chaos. The yashti was a very important component of the stupa and was influenced greatly by Ashoka, the emperor of the Maurya Empire from 273 BC to 232 BC, who introduced the Ashokan pillar. He reigned over most of South Asia and beyond, present-day Afghanistan to Bengal and even as far south as Mysore. After his conversion to Buddhism from a career of conquest and violence, Emperor Ashoka built edict pillars all over India to entail Buddhist law. He inscribed on rocks and the pillars that he instituted across his empire with Greek, Aramaic, and Brahmi scripts. Emperor Ashoka erected numerous pillars at the sacred sites of Buddhism in attempts to make Buddhism a worldwide tradition. Similar to the cosmic pillar, the Ashokan pillar displayed Buddha's teaching. Ashoka also incorporated other elements on the pillar to establish Buddhism. Animals like the bull, the elephant, the horse, and especially the lion were present. The lions were used as a symbol of Buddha's royalty. The Buddha was known as the Shakya lion during Ashoka's time. so this symbol was used on the Buddhist pillars he planted throughout India. The lion capital was the national symbol of India and is associated with regality, strength, and power. These pillars have been noted with Persian inspiration and influence seen in the character and structure of the animals themselves. Distinctively, the lions were usually depicted with triangular-shaped eyes, muscular legs, and stylized mane and whiskers, which were all Persian elements and techniques. The cosmic pillar capitals also implemented other parts of Buddhism and Indian culture. For example, the Varsastali, or inverted water pot, was essentially monsoon iconography of India, but also was a part of the cosmic pillar. The Chakra, or wheel of Buddhism, also decorated the capital's platform and brought another valuable feature to the pillar which impacted Buddhism. The Chakra, the Buddhist wheel of law or righteousness, is invariably associated with the Buddha's first sermon, during which he is said to have set the wheel of law in motion, as noted in Susan Huntington's article, a distinguished professor of history of art at The Ohio State University. The chakra evolved as a symbol of the Buddhist teachings and as an emblem of the Chakravartin, or wheel turner, identifying the wheel as the Dharma chakra, or wheel of law, while the Tibetan term for Dharma chakra literally means the wheel of transformation. Dharma chakra also symbolizes the Four Noble Truths expressed by Buddha. The fluid motion of the wheel presents a suitable metaphor for the rapid spiritual change produced by Buddha's teachings. Therefore, Buddha's first discourse at the Deer Park in Sarnath is known as the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. The chakra is the basic shape of a circle, which represents completeness and perfection across traditions. It is also made up of three main parts: the hub, the spokes, and the rim, and each has inherent symbolism with the three aspects of Buddhist practice. The hub stands for training in moral discipline. Through this practice, the mind is supported and stabilized. Thus, it is the practice of moral discipline that upholds our meditation, just like the supporting axis of the world. The spokes stand for the correct application of wisdom, which cuts off ignorance and ends suffering. The Dharma chakra has 8 spokes, symbolizing the Eightfold Noble Path. The rim denotes concentration, which holds the entire meditative practice together, just as the wheel of life is held together by its rim. Chakras are commonly depicted at the top of cosmic pillars and were found in carvings at the Great Stupa at Sanchi. Along with chakras and prayer wheels, footprints of the Buddha were sculpted in Buddhist imagery. These two elements were even seen together in iconography, as will be revealed. The Buddha footprint, or Buddhapada in Sanskrit, or Buddha feet, represents the impact of the teachings of Buddha on the world. Buddha's footprints symbolize his presence and were believed to be the imprints where he actually touched the ground before his enlightenment. At the same time, the Buddhapada signify Buddha's absence once he entered nirvana, a reminder of the Buddhist ideal of non-attachment. Representations of these footprints share correlative characteristics. Firstly, all of Buddha's toes are portrayed as having the same length, and secondly, the footprint is incised in stone. Thirdly, the Dharma chakra is seen in the center of the footprint, illustrated at Sanchi in sculpted motifs. This distinguished mark appears at the center of the sole. Other very early Buddhist symbols also appear on the heels and toes, for instance, the lotus, the swastika, and the Triratna, or the three jewels. These Buddhist footprints are still venerated in countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand, and the Buddhapada image is also found on Tibetan tankas, otherwise known as a three-dimensional object, as a painted or embroidered picture panel, a textile mounting, and having either a silk cover, leather corners, wooden dowels, or metal or wooden decorative knobs. The next part of aniconism in early Buddhist iconography is the Bodhi tree and empty throne. Bodhi tree is a name given to the banyan tree where Buddha sat beneath and attained enlightenment. The banyan tree was always thought of as a sacred tree and was already an object of worship in existing culture in India. Bodhi literally means awakening from Pali and Sanskrit. given in Buddhism to the specific awakening experience attained by the Indian spiritual teacher Siddhartha Gautama and his disciples. The throne is a reference to Buddha's royal ancestry and to the idea of spiritual kingship, enlightenment as ruler of the spiritual world. The Bodhi tree and the empty throne are depicted in Buddhist iconography concurrently to create a unity between the two. Several carvings from the Sanchi stupa are examples displaying both elements working as one, like in the Enlightenment, in the miracle of walking on waters, etc. Like the Bodhi tree and empty throne, the Parasol is also depicted in narrative scenes of Buddha's life at the Great Stupa at Sanchi. Generally speaking, the Parasol is symbolized by the umbrella, whose important function is to cast a shadow, the shadow of protection. The Parasol, or umbrella, is a traditional Indian symbol of both protection and royalty, as it served also as a status symbol. The coolness of its shade symbolizes protection from the heat of suffering, desire, and other spiritually harmful forces. These umbrellas are even seen at the top of the yashti of the Great Stupa at Sanchi, which are identified as Kshetravali. The dome of the umbrella is held aloft by a vertical handle, which is recurring with the image of the axis mundi, or the central axis upholding the world. The parasol is also very common in Tibetan Buddhist symbols. It is occasionally shaped as an octagon or square representing the Noble Eightfold Path and the four directional quarters respectively. The lotus, or Padma in Sanskrit, is yet another central symbol in Buddhism. It is one of Buddhism's most recognized motifs and is associated with every important deity, either by being seated upon it or holding one in their hands. According to a scholar, in esoteric Buddhism, the heart of the beings is like an unopened lotus. When the virtues of the Buddha develop therein, the lotus blossoms. That is why the Buddha sits upon a lotus bloom. Because the roots of a lotus are in the mud, the stem grows up through the water, and then the flower lies above the water in the sunlight. This pattern of growth signifies the progress of the soul from the primeval mud of materialism, through the waters of experience and into the bright sunshine of enlightenment. The lotus is distinguished by the strength of its stem, which helps it rise consistently 8 to 12 inches above the surface. As it grows in the mud, but blooms untainted above the surface, it symbolizes those who overcome ignorance and attain enlightenment. From this, the flower is used as an example of divine beauty, a symbol of purity in a polluted environment, and its unfolding petals insinuate the idea of the soul's expansion. Through early Buddhist iconography, many different symbols embodied Buddha and his teachings without using a personal image of him. He strongly disfavored this type of portrayal, hence this reluctance towards anthropomorphic representations of the Buddha, and this avoidance in early Buddhist art. Each individual aniconic symbol previously discussed plays a crucial role in maintaining what Buddha expressed in the Digha Nikaya, the removal of his physical image in art. During the examination of the stupa, the cosmic pillar, the prayer wheel, Buddha's footprints, the Bodhi tree and empty throne, the parasol, and the lotus, it is evident that Buddhist iconography relied heavily on symbols in which Buddha would be portrayed without his physical form. These symbols are still used in Indian and other cultures around the world, and are still being taught in classrooms with the history of Buddhism and Buddhist art. This early period in Buddhism between the 5th and the 1st century BC is the foundation of this religion and its history. The concepts from this specific symbolism and aniconism have carried throughout time, and they have continuously been applied in the religion and in its teachings.